Productive Pastor 126, the biggest productivity lessons I've learned this year. What's going on, friends? It's Chad. Welcome back to Productive Pastors, the place online where we talk about ministry health through strategic productivity. This episode's, I think it's coming alive the day after Christmas. I'm hoping that you're listening to this on release day. I hope you're with your family. I hope you're hanging out. I hope you're having fun. I hope you had a fantastic holiday. I hope Christmas Eve was rad for you in your church. This is weird. This is the first year I have not had to do a Christmas Eve service, I think, since 2005. I don't know what to do. I'm excited about going to one, though. And my family were heading over to Galveston to hang out with each other for a couple of days. I'm going to sneak over to this super old Episcopal church that has a 9:30 p.m. Christmas Eve service. And I'm stoked about that. That's going to be super, super cool. And also, remember, the 27th, the day after we release this episode is when my mini course for the end of the year comes out. It's called Prepare Focused Sermons. It's a template pack of all of the worksheets I use to preach, to prepare sermons, along with the teaching video. It comes out on Friday. The cart opens. It's open for 72 hours. It costs $27. Then the cart closes. We did this last Memorial Day for the planner template pack, and a bunch of folks jumped on it, and I love seeing this stuff come out. And so if you're not part of that wait list, make sure you jump onto that when it comes out, because this is a cool resource that I'm just stoked. It's about sermon design, and it's about using these things to prepare sermons. So hope you jump on that. It'll come out the day after this episode releases, but let's get on to these lessons. Now, one of the biggest changes that has happened to me in the last year is for the last 6 months, I've not been in a local church. I've been full-time as the Congregational Vitality Strategist for the Louisiana Conference United Methodist Church. I was doing it part-time before, but really the last 6 months, I didn't want to call this episode, the biggest productivity lessons I've learned over the last 6 months, because, but the year is pulling into this, but it's been a change. It's been a change of ministry. I work with the team. I have bosses for the first time since I was in seminary or left seminary. It's just a completely different vibe, and I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot. I talk on the show a lot about vocational capacity, and I feel like I've had to grow in a lot of those capacities over the last year, and I'm growing, and I'm working on it. And I tell folks, hey, let me know how I can do a better job at this. I'm still figuring the ropes out of this matter. And I'm also, I'm 2 hours away from the office, so I work all over the state, and I'm by myself a lot. And so productivity matters a lot, and I've learned a lot of things. I've got 10, which is a bunch. Normally I like to do lists of 3 or lists of 5. We got 10. So buckle in. Let's get on with these lists, and let me just share the biggest productivity lessons I've learned this year. The first one I've learned is the time of day matters. Now, you've heard me harp on this for years, but what's so funny is in the last year, my times have begun shifting. For years, I was never that productive in the afternoon. And now, around 3 p.m., I can get a different bump. And I've learned how to, use and save certain types of work, especially work that might be really, really big and the scope might be really, really large, and you could call it monotonous. And I'll save that stuff to like 3, and I can hammer out some stuff. I've learned to value my mornings a lot more. I've learned to value the certain types of things and, to protect my calendar in certain ways. That's the way that I've learned this. My time of day matters so much. And so I'm so much more defendable of my time. And you might be saying, hey, Chad, but you're not in a local church. You're not in an office. You've got a lot of control over your schedule. I got a phone next to me, and I've got, people I work with, I'm responsible for things for. And I also have, an entire state of churches and pastors that can reach out. And so, I still deal with, interruptions or distractions in the same way that I did when I was in the local church. But it's just in a different way right now. And so I've learned how to manage all of that. And so defending these times of days, saving particular work for these times of days, and building up, different rhythms of what happens on Mondays, on Tuesdays, that sort of stuff. But the time of day, I've always said is important, but it's grown important in very different ways over the last year. That's the first thing I've learned. The second thing is, learning about saying yes and saying no. Now, in Clifton Strengths, I'm an activator. That's my number 2 strength the last time I took the test. That means I love to start new stuff. Like if you want to come in and try to distract me, ask me to start something new. You can do it. And so I've had to learn how to do all of that. I talk on the podcast a lot about being responsive versus reactive, and I'll throw the word proactive in there. That's the word for me right now. It's proactive. It's planning ahead. It's knowing when I'm going to have time for things. It's the push and pull methodology we talked about a few episodes back of, learning to say, no, I can't do that right now, but in 2 weeks I should be able to. Let's talk about what exactly you need in that moment, and to get the clarity for what that happens. I've learned to say no to stuff. The last few months, I've begun saying no to some really cool things. Some of them are internal, that, they directly touch my role, and they're things I could easily say yes to. Some of them are stuff, for a couple of years, I was out on my own doing independent development while I was a part-time local pastor here. And I had to say yes to a lot of things just to, take care of myself and my family. I've been saying no to things over the last couple of months that I always would have said yes to. Now, I'm also internally having to say yes and no to myself in very different ways because, like I said, I love to do new things. I love to build new things. I like to start all this kind of stuff. And so I have this massive file of 1 days of things I think would be cool. That might be the question I ask myself more often than not. Is this right or is this cool? And if it's just cool, it just goes into a folder and I save it. And hopefully one day I can attach some energy to it. But I've learned so much about saying yes and saying no to stuff. The third thing I've learned this year is communication priority. This is not like organizational communication or outward facing communication. You've heard me say that communication is more important than programming in the local church right now. That's absolutely true. I believe it to be. That's not what I'm talking about here right now. I'm talking about one-on-one communication. I communicate a lot more now. I have a lot more open conversations and open loops in the air now than I think I might have ever had before. This is not like I get a text message sending me a random meme or a joke and I don't respond to it for a couple of 3 days. It's, hey, this is a person has a significant question or a need. I need to pop back and learn, I can't do it. I might not be able to drop everything and do it right now, but say, hey, can I give you a call at 2:00 today? And then set a reminder on my phone, call so-and-so at 2:00. Be ready for that. I've also been aware of the certain places that communication might be telling a different story, and me being on top of communication in my job right now, it's just really important. It matters. It's critical, and because it's not just speaking for me, but it's speaking for the larger whole. And so I'm a lot more aware of what this communication looks like. The little things matter, the little tiny things, because everybody communicates differently. And I love to say that you get to declare what communication channels you're going to pay the most attention to. And I think to the point we do, but that means we can't neglect, a handful of these other communication channels that might be really a big thing to somebody else. And so now I've got, multiple email inboxes I have to look at. Sidebar, I despise Microsoft Outlook. Holler at your boy if you hate it too. But I've got, multiple email addresses. I have to be aware of my text messages. I've got to be aware of Facebook messages, because Facebook a lot of times, and I do this too, if I don't have somebody's phone number or email, rather than look it up, because I know I could go find it somewhere, I'll just hit pop over to Facebook Messenger and keep my fingers crossed so they monitor Messenger. I don't have alerts set up for Messenger. And so it's not the best place for me, but other people pay attention to it. And so I've had to learn, that these little communication pieces matter, and to loop somebody into the most appropriate place where the communication might have to happen. And so sometimes that is, hey, shoot me over an email. Here's my email address. Or it is realizing, hey, this could be better answered with a phone conversation. Can I call you this afternoon at 3:30 and talk about it? The little communication things matter. No, the big communication things matter a lot. I put on a workshop series multiple times a year, and, looking at how is the outward facing communication for that. If someone registers for the workshop, knowing a couple of days before the workshop meets, it's great to send an email giving them, all the little bits and pieces of information that they might need to know or want to know for the event. That outward facing communication in those big ways also matters a lot, or just especially, the way that you email your good friend or a staff member you get along with really well versus you email somebody that's, higher up the ladder than you are. That's a different thing. Professional communication. I've been really working on what does professional communication look like, because in almost every area of my life, like if you get the Productive Pastor emails, I'm a really, really casual person. But I've learned that, sometimes that has to change. And so communication priority has been a thing that I've been learning so much about this year. Now, to get some more personal stuff, analog. I've done an episode in the last couple of months about, why I'm kind of shifting back into analog. And for some reason, this has been a big, huge game change for me since around August when I was going somewhere. And luckily, I threw in a blank notebook and a handful of index cards in my bag, went to this conference, and quickly realized that between my iPad's getting older and does not like to stay alive as long as it used to, but then also it's just kind of cumbersome to pull out the big 12-inch iPad Pro in some places. I found myself falling back into analog. And I'll be honest with you, like if Chad could get anything for Christmas, I want 10,000 4x6 index cards, because I go through those things for everything, because I've just learned that, my mind, it shifts in that direction so much more. So I'm using that for to-dos. I've got, the day sheet that I've used for years. I did an order of those to kind of see what they look like from a printing company. So I've got a pad of, I think 50 to a pad, where I can, jot things down, peel it off, have it in front of me, and then at the end of the day, make my notes on it and stuff, kind of put it on the corner of the desk, and once a week I file all of them so I have access to it. I've said before, I might turn that loose as I've never done a physical product before, but, if having a pad of the day sheets is interesting to you, tell me, shout out something on Twitter, drop in a Productive Pastor community on Facebook and say, Chad, let's talk about the day sheet pad. It's just a thing for me in so many ways. It also helps me when I'm being present with somebody that I'm meeting with, is if am writing with a physical pen and a piece of paper in some way, I'm not just tempted to horse around, even though I never would do that. I would always get Good Notes is open on the iPad. There's just something about the physical presence of it that's there. And I'm still trying to sort out all these things. I'm going to talk about another big one later on in this list, but I'm just learning lessons about, for me, why analog productivity tends to be more appropriate in this season. I'll say that. The next thing, the fifth thing is systems. And I've always been a big systems fan, but I've learned so much more about them, because for me, 9 times out of 10, a system was a private thing. We had systems at the church that I pastored full time, and we followed those, but it was much more of a, Chad wants us to do things this way, so let's do it. I run several different really large programs that have the same steps with multiple churches inside of them. And I've just learned it is a lot easier to lead those programs and to walk people through a 12-month development program when there is a system and plan. I know what the system is. They know what the system is. I can schedule when certain things have to happen inside of that. So going back to the communication piece, make a note, email Pastor so-and-so about, checklist number 3 in this system on Monday morning. It's just that piece of stuff. And I'm still learning to do this. I'm still getting better at this. I'm not good at this yet. I'm working on getting better at it. It's repeatable. And especially if you're having to do something really complex multiple times over and over and over again, your systems need to be repeatable. They need to be shareable. I use Trello for so many of these things. It's still the easiest and best way that I found to share this sort of stuff. They also have to be easy to understand. I can deal with complexity, and I also have a little bit of like Rain Man inside of me. And so if I'm developing something completely for me personally, it's almost like I like the aesthetic quality of it being on paper and being chaotic. But that's not easy. That's not simple. People can't understand that. So I've had to learn to really condense stuff down. I learned this really well when a friend of mine, I've been on this job it was almost a year and a half ago when I first started, and it was like the first big thing that I did, and I was so stoked for it. And we get done for like 6 hours, and they came up to me, and they said, that's a good friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. We've worked together on a lot of stuff. And they said, Chad, listen, I can tell what you're talking about is great, but I feel like you are going 15 times faster than I have the capability to go right now. And so I have just been trying to make things so seriously easy to understand, and always just kind of iterating it down to be simpler and simpler. Number 6, consistency. Consistency is in a direct correlation in relationship to trust. Consistency, when we're consistent people, that also helps people understand expectation, not what you're expecting of them, but more so what they can expect out of you. And I work on consistency so much. And, the podcast has been a little erratic over the last month or so because there's been other things that they deserve more attention. So you might be saying, Chad, you're not that consistent with this. Yeah. I'm trying to reimagine right now, what does this look like now that it is like completely, at almost hobby level again, because I know the work that we're doing here, Productive Pastor Matters. But I had to be consistent on other stuff that was more important. And so I'm kind of always looking at myself now, like, how can I be more consistent? How can I be more consistent with every single part of my life? Because I know the more consistent I am inside of intentionality, the healthier I am physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, the more I'm growing my vocational capacities, all of this sort of stuff. So I think a lot about consistency. This next thing is this, number 7. It's that relationships help, especially when you're working with other people. You have to have an appropriate relationship of respect and of trust inside of there. And I could probably talk about that for like 20 minutes. But I've learned pretty quickly early on that I can't assume that somebody knows something. I can't assume that communication in some other realm has happened or has worked. And so I've learned that I have to honor the relationship and make sure someone always knows what's going on before they have to do something about it. But then also, that friendship side of things. And this has changed at me a lot over the last decade of what I would have said 10 years ago versus what I would say now. But you have to have a relationship with somebody. You have to have those unplanned lunches, those conversations, those fun things. You've got to be able to tell them happy birthday, or if something gnarly is going on, that text message, hey, I'm praying for you. And you got to follow up and check back up on them. It's so easy. And this happens in ministry too. I think one of the reasons that people have a lack of trust with the church right now is that the relationships are completely mechanistic. That's a thing that's there. I also lead primarily with influencing strengths in the Clifton Strength Finders. And anybody who leads with an influencing strength, what that means is we get things done by influencing others to do them. And there's some danger zones that are attached to there. And if I kind of go back on the low points in ministry over my career, so many of those low points happened because I had a dysfunctional relationship with that person. And that doesn't mean you can go into it and think about it in terms of, manipulation. Like that's the magic word of an unhealthy person with influencing strengths is manipulation. You can't think into it like, well, I'm going to go buy this person a lunch so they do X for me. No, you've got to learn just to have honest to goodness human relationships. And so I've learned a lot about that sort of a thing. And, relationships matter so much. For your productivity. It's a lot easier to do the job you have to get done when the people you work with are enthusiastic about working alongside of you. So number 8 on this list is take the time to stretch your brain. Now, I've always read a lot, but if I'm honest, between 2021 and 2023, I kind of quit reading. And I seemed to not be able to do the things that had always been easy for me. Now, there's some other reasons why. Mainly because I'm getting older, and author Brooks in his book, Strength to Strength, says so many amazing things about how, our brain and so many things change starting in our mid 40s. And I've realized that, a lot of the health I think I have right now was kind of making some of these realizations that he talked about. Like he was saying these things and I was like, oh, that's why I've been feeling like X or Y, whatever it is. But, I began reading again this year. I began reading a lot again this year. I began reading kind of widely. Some of the stuff makes no sense. Like I'm reading, more theology and biblical studies than I really have the time for right now. And then since I'm not preaching weekly or any sort of discipleship function, it might not make sense for me to be doing that. But hey, it's a place that my brain needs to stretch. I have to have other avenues to think in. I've learned to read intentionally inside of both the church and their dynamics of leadership and church growth and development, which is my job. But then also to filter out where are the places where, the secular world can say things about this. And how do I quickly realize what's helpful and what's not helpful? For some books I'm reading right now, I don't have to read it cover to cover. It's like, hey, these 2 chapters are going to be really, really important. So read those 2 chapters really well, Chad. And so, because it stretches my brain, I'm able to think so much more. I'm able to problem solve. I'm able to do so many more things now this last year. And I think it's because I started reading again and giving myself the time and space to read. And not a lot, like maybe an hour in the morning. And then, I might find another 30 minutes later on in the day, unless it's directly related to a project. But, reading is stretching my brain in a very helpful way and is making me more productive again. The 9th thing, this is relating to the analog stuff. It's related to the reading and stretching. It's related to so much, but in the last 4 months, have begun building what's called an analog Zettelkasten. Now, if you use Obsidian as a software or Rome Research, it has some elements of Zettelkasten. It's just a fancy German word for slip box. It's for literally index cards filed in a box. But I found that because it helped me begin managing all the information and connecting, everything I've learned before in the past and what I'm learning right now towards practical applications in the present. I'm going to do something bigger to explain Zettelkasten for ministry in 2025. But I teach a lot of workshops. There's a lot of times people kind of call me about information for certain things, or I'm writing, and I'm doing more and more now inside of this church development role. All of this kind of stuff, it's allowing me to not waste what I've read and what I've thought and what I've learned. And it's put it together in a place where I can pull it back up really easily, really quickly, faster than tags in Evernote. I monkeyed around with Rome a couple of years ago. I thought that might have been this complete digital solution, but it did not work as well. But I'm going to take about 10 minutes every morning to kind of read through some stuff I've highlighted before in the past and Readwise to do a little bit of work for my Zettelkasten there, maybe create some new cards. And then I'm going to take like 20 minutes every evening, and I'm going to kind of file through cards. And then a lot of times if I have a project I'm working on, I go into the 4 or 5 or 6 keywords that might affect that project. I pull the cards, and the next thing I know, I've got and it's not just saving quotes or saving information. It's also the way that you interact and that you process things down in that information. That I have 30 or 40 pieces in front of me. I can pull the 3 or 4 that matter the most, and then I can build stuff off of there. It's fast-tracked a lot of stuff, but it's going back to this whole brainwave type thinking that you begin doing in middle age, to where you're not so much acting and you're not so much innovating, but you're basing your life on and your thoughts on this experience, and you're slowing down a lot. And it's back to Author Brooke, Strength to Strength. You haven't read it yet, pick it up. It's a great read. You can read it over the holidays. It's pretty simple. But that's it. The Analog Zettelkasten is number 9. And then number 10, I kind of hinted on this earlier on the systems piece, but number 10, keep things simple. I'm always asking myself now, how can I make this simpler? How can I make this simpler? How can I make this simpler? How can I reduce this thing that might be big into, 5 really simple things that you can understand? How do I maybe, move things around to make it more simple? How do I also not have like expectations that are completely based off of what's easy for me into another person? And it's all that kind of stuff. So I'm striving for simplicity in so many areas right now, because it's allowing me to actually do more and be more productive, because I'm not banging my head against the wall, asking why something's not understood, or why people aren't responding, or why, anything else that we're doing may or may not be clicking. So that's it. 10 things I've learned about productivity this year in 2024. Guys, it's been a fantastic year. And it's been a great year with the podcast and the community. It's been a great year at work. It's been a great year with family. It's been a great year. It's been cool. And so I hope your 2024 has been good. I hope you're having the time to think through things, reflect, think about 2025. I've been writing about, planning for the new year over in the Productive Pastor emails. If you've not gotten that yet, I encourage you, hey, go to the show notes, sign up for that, get on those emails. You can get the archives for there as well. Also, don't forget about Prepare Focus sermons. It's going to be cool. It's going to be cool. I want you to have the cool part of that in your life. So thanks so much, friends, for listening. I hope you had a fantastic holiday. We'll be back in the next episode. I'm Chad. It's always an honor to be with you. Bye.